So there have been a few fast-growing companies. I'll name two of them: Tomato Jaws. I don't know if you're familiar with them, and Real Fruit. So over time, they have been sort of taking us along on their journey through entrepreneurship. The amount of employees they hire, the progress of their businesses, and they have been facing extreme roadblocks, especially when it comes to fees that they have to pay, these tariffs, and you know, we keep talking about moving up in the ease of growing business index, but if these businesses are telling us that, you know, it's still hard for us, then, you know, isn't it more believable coming from them than from getting our information from, you know, from World Bank or any place else? And also, I would like to hear from you about what role do you think data can play in promoting opportunities for employment in both private and public sectors?
Thank you, thank you. I think the very first time I was in Lagos by myself was in 2005. Prior to that time, I've always come to Lagos with my parents. So the very first time I found myself in Lagos was in 2005. In 2007, we started a company, which was like 2 years after the first time I came to Lagos. And I recall it was just myself and my partner, and we had one staff. Now we're 165 people in our organization. And I think one of the real things I can say is, for me, I never got the opportunity to ever work anywhere. So I don't really know what it feels like to find a job or to work in an organization and try to rise the ranks. The only thing I've known is to start a business and attempt to grow it organically till you can find promise as the case. And we had many challenges. So I think the very first thing I wanted to say to that was, it's actually possible to start an enterprise here and take it forward, despite the many challenges we speak about. You mentioned there are organizations in Nigeria who have also done the same, and have faced, I would say, different bottlenecks or roadblocks in an attempt to build a business. And while that is true, right, I think the amount of enterprising opportunities that exist here is overwhelming. Every day, I struggle with what business I shouldn't start, not what I should start. Because whether it's in attempting to cross over the bridge to come to the island, or maybe I think last week I was thinking of starting an hospital because one of my staff went to the hospital and it wasn't really well treated. So I think the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of overwhelming enterprising opportunity. And once you start to look away from what can I take, which is oftentimes where the mindset comes into play, what can I take from society or what can I take from government, to what exactly exists around me, and you start to look a lot more inward, you see spaces to play as the case is. Now for data, you did ask, is there an opportunity for internet penetration to be something to open access? I think data should be one new fundamental human right. I think every human being should have access to the internet. Because the reality is what it requires to fix education, we probably don't have it in financial resources and even in time. We're late already on many fronts. So the internet itself offers one of the real opportunities to provide quality access to anything, whether it's quality access to education, quality access to healthcare, for the massive population we have. So I largely believe that data and internet penetration will play a huge role, and maybe governments today must now start to think about it as almost the new infrastructure to build, as we're attempting to build I'll say main infrastructure. We also want to think about what is this type of infrastructure we must build. Obviously, government can't build it all, but how can I enable and support the process that means that people are having access to internet connectivity as the case is? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask the last question, and then we're going to go to Q&A. We'll take a few questions from the audience. And my last question is to you, Mr. Akintunde. A majority of our population already works, although most work in low productivity, low income jobs that allow them to consume what they produce or live off modest profits from what they sell. Therefore, it's not just about jobs, but the quality of said jobs. In what ways do you think government can improve opportunities to ensure that the population can move towards attaining middle income status through quality jobs?
I mean, I think there are models that certainly work. I think first we have to be a bit more export focused. But even within the export market, we need to be very laser focused on specific sectors. I think if there's one thing as a country we haven't done very well, is we've tried to do so many things, right? So if you look at Bangladesh, right, they've just nailed themselves to garment making, you know, and said, you know, we're going to be as good as anybody in this space, right? And we're going to use this industry to take millions of people out of poverty. Now, in my opinion, I mean, we could nail ourselves to something like business process outsourcing, right? We speak relatively toneless English. There's relatively decent talent. We are GMT +1. There's harmony with Central Europe, etc. There are a lot of things within that give us competitive advantage, right? And we can leapfrog some of our obvious deficiencies where we are located geographically, our power, infrastructure deficiency, etc. So I think the one thing that we need to do is to say, look, all these guys who have gone into farming, right? They've learned some skill. I agree that a lot of the jobs you get in things like agriculture are relatively subsistence, low-income jobs, which is a fair point. But instead of moving those people into the industries, we perhaps have a great opportunity to move them into the service economy, right? Because a lot of, in all of these places, I think the point has been made across the panel, that there's a lot of incredible talent across the country. So the challenge isn't even, yes, our educational system can improve, etc., but in a country of 180 million people, trust me, there's enough talent to even start building that capacity. So the point has to be, look, take one or two sectors and focus completely on those. Morocco, for example, says we're close to Europe. We want to focus on the auto industry. So while the previous government was messing around trebling tariff on the auto industry, Morocco was saying to auto industry makers, we'll give you a tax holiday for 10 years. After that, for the next 10 years, you'll pay 8% or so in taxes. We'll build everything we need to build to be competitive in this one sector. And I think that's where we have to, as a country, start to find competitive advantage. Start with one sector, not 5 or 6 or 7 different sectors.
You mentioned that the opportunities are there. So do you believe that we don't have a problem of opportunities, but of skilled labor?
So I think it's a mix of a few things. So first, there's a lot of information asymmetry in the jobs market, right? There are jobs available, people don't know where they are. So from an infrastructure perspective, if you thought about different economies where there are job centers, where you could go and find, you know, what jobs exist in this locality, etc., we have none of that infrastructure today. So there's that information asymmetry that you need to solve. Of course, there's also the need to provide some sector-specific skills, so that you're a generalist, right? You speak good English, you understand stuff, you can reason critically, etc. Doesn't mean that you're a great coder. It means that you have the attributes, right, for software development, but you then need that sector-specific skill, right, to lay on top of a lot of the generalist stuff we have. So I think our challenge is we have a lot of generalist skill, right, but there isn't enough sector-specific skill, and that's where the investment needs to happen.
Right, thank you so much. So before we take the Q&A, he mentioned Morocco and how they were able to attract the automotive industry. And one of the things Morocco did was set up over 1,000 vocational training centers all across all across Morocco, which is very interesting to me because we had vocational training centers which are not there now. Morocco didn't just improve policies, but they had to implement them, and they had to ensure that the people had the skills to take up these jobs. We have come to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you, guys. I think we've run out of time. We're just going to take a few questions from the audience, and we'll move on.
Thank you very much, Fakria and the panelists. A round of applause for them one more time, ladies and gentlemen.